just not going overboard. And Eboni Williams, who is a Democratic strategist, who even says spending can get out of control, wonders if we're there yet. So, Eboni, to you first on that, do you think right now the levels at which we're spending on a lot of these social programs is excessive?
It's excessive, and I would say it's bordering on irresponsible, Neil. The problem isn't, as you said, spending or having compassion for people who are in real transitional stages in their life where they do need the government to step in and offer a yielding hand. The problem is the effectiveness and the efficiency that we are spending. And you're right, we're not really following the money trail like we should. And if you're asked on either side of the aisle, Democrat or Republican, if you ask those questions, then somehow then you become the bad guy. It can't be that way. We have to increase the transition and the transparency in these programs if we want to be able to continue to sustain them.
Are you sure you're a Democratic strategist?
I'm an independent progressive, Neil, but yeah, of course, it works both ways.
Niger, on that issue here, I mean, a lot of people are afraid being mocked, and a lot of people are afraid being laughed at. And so when they see that they become fodder for comics and all, they stand down because, oh, no, I don't want to be laughed at. What do you make of that?
Well, I think limousine liberals like Jon Stewart take the easy way out by casting dispersions by those that are asking legitimate questions. And I applaud you and Eboni for looking at efficiency and seeing if there's any waste in the program. But I'm actually looking at it from the recipient side, because I have compassion for those recipients that are growing in dependency, and I have compassion for our culture that is becoming more and more of a dependency culture. You know, within the Congress of Racial Equality, we were advocates for welfare reform, not because there was waste, not because there was corruption in welfare, but because we wanted to liberate people off of welfare and get them into jobs.
You know, Todd, the one thing that worries me is if we are at the point where 1 in 5 are getting food stamps in this country and 1 in 3 are getting some type of food assistance, and you're saying that they all deserve it, then we really are in a world of hurt here, because that shouldn't be in a Western power of our size and affluence.
Bingo. And that's the key thing, though, because you can't worry about what they're spending their money on. I know there's a big debate about, we heard it with Jon Stewart with the toothpaste and the car seats. That's completely irrelevant. It really does go back to the recipients.
And it's a side issue. And I think many on the right have made this a sort of a ridiculous issue by, you know, putting this through the eye of the needle here. The fact is that the needle itself is very, very expensive.
Right. Well, listen, you have here's the biggest issue, though, is that in this country right now, you can't stop food stamps. You just can't. There's zero accountability. There's zero reporting on this. All it really is a matter is if you have a need for the food stamps, you can apply, and granted, you're probably going to get that. I mean, barring some unforeseen circumstance. Here's the issue, though, is that you don't have job creation in this country, and the jobs that are being created are low-wage jobs, and therefore you cannot support a family of 4. So you have to figure out a way to put food on your family's table. And the last thing we want in this country is to cut off food, because that's what happened in the Middle East. That's what we saw. You can't stop feeding Americans. You got to have compassion for them. And clearly, I mean,
well, the question is, we want to have those who genuinely need it.
Right.
What I'm wondering here is that I know where this is going, because I know a budget that the president just put out, and Republicans, without so much as saying boo, have gone on to say that, look, we're going to continue doing this, but key in that budget is the president raising taxes by another $1 trillion over 10 years. Because obviously there's a little appetite for cutting the spending, so the only way you can afford this is to keep hiking the taxes. And that hits a limit and hits a wall, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's kicking the can down the road, Neil, for sure. What I think the president's got to do, though, is bring this whole program, along with many others, back to incentive bases. And, I mean, the guests are completely right. You don't want a generation that is dependent. I've seen that in my own family. I've seen that around my communities, and it's something that's problematic to all of us. But when you root it back to incentive, you put a timeline on it. You're right. You can't stop feeding Americans, but it's, again, not designed to be a permanent program. It's transitional. After a year, 2 years, come on, there's got to be some transition from food stamps to jobs so that we all can be better.
But there's no strategy to get off of that, though. There's no program that's in place. I mean, all we hear about is
It's a built-in backstop.
Continuing to spend, continuing to dole out cash, but there's no strategy to spin them out of that.
Niger.
What's worse is you have an administration that is very hostile to the greatest generator of those jobs that are going to give people the opportunity to leave a life of dependency and and lead a life where they're self-sustaining, and that is small business development. You've got taxes that are going to be increased on small businesses. You've got indirect taxes like Obamacare and the ramifications that are going to be increased on small business. I mean, why is this administration hostile to the Keystone Pipeline? The energy sector is the one sector in this phony recovery of ours, this smoke and mirrors recovery, that is actually providing real jobs. In North Dakota, they don't have enough people to fill the jobs. Why is this administration hostile to job creation while at the same time promoting dependency?
All I'm saying, guys, and I think we kind of touched on all the key issues, both parties then have to come to the table and look at their sacred cows. And we're not talking, cutting seems to imply to a lot of people you're removing programs. The best we can do these days is slow the growth of them. Both parties, all programs you hold near and dear, you got to contain them. Or else we're all in the container.
Restructure them, Neil.
Or something, because this is not sustainable, and that's no joke.
And show growth in what you're spending. You have to show something.
Or accountability for the money you are. In the meantime, coming up, Vladimir Putin, the